The galaxy of Xylenia was a place of cold perfection. Towering crystal cities floated above oceans of silver light, and every citizen moved with purpose, precision, and pride. Among them, humans were considered curiosities, strange, unpredictable creatures from a distant world. Kale, a human ambassador, had arrived on this glittering planet with nothing but goodwill, unaware of the cruel jest that awaited him. The Xylenian Council, always hungry for amusement, had devised a scheme. They would present him with Princess Leora, a woman infamous for her inability to bear children. To them, she was a living joke, a symbol of imperfection in their flawless society. The council expected Kale to recoil, laugh awkwardly, or dismiss her. And they were eager to watch his discomfort when Kale first saw her. He was struck not by her alleged barrenness, nor by her royal robes glimmering with Xylenian light, but by the quiet sadness in her eyes. Leora stood with elegance, her posture perfect, but her gaze was heavy with years of being judged, dismissed, and pitied. The room was silent as the council waited, and Kale could feel the tension radiating from the alien nobles. They were poised, rigid, and smug, certain that their prank would succeed. But Kale's response was unexpected. He bowed respectfully and offered her a hand to walk beside him. His voice, gentle and kind, invited her to join him not as a joke, but as an equal. For the first time in her life, Leora felt seen. The Xylenians had always measured her worth by her ability to fulfill her role as a princess capable of producing heirs. Yet this human, a stranger from a foreign world, did not flinch at her history or her limitations. Instead, he treated her as though she were valuable simply because she existed. The shock of this simple respect stirred something deep inside her, a small flicker of hope she had long buried. Her lips curved into a smile, hesitant at first, but real. Kale noticed, and for a moment, the room felt less like a hall of judgment and more like a space where two beings could exist freely. If only for a moment, the council whispered among themselves, their expectations crumbling. Their jokes had always landed perfectly before, leaving the targets humiliated or flustered. Yet here was Kale, unmoved, unaffected, and strangely compassionate. He spoke with warmth about his home world, describing Earth's blue oceans, its ever-changing skies, and the simple joys of watching rain fall on a quiet street. Leora listened, captivated. She had never heard anyone speak of life so simply, yet so beautifully. Her laughter, soft and hesitant, echoed in the hall, and Kale's eyes lit up with the delight of hearing it. It was a sound they both knew was rare and precious, a reminder that life could hold small miracles, even in the most controlled of worlds. The human's kindness began to break the invisible walls Leora had built around herself. The council's amusement shifted into unease as they realized their joke was failing. Their expectations, so carefully crafted, had been turned upside down. Kale, unaware of the spectacle he had created, continued to speak with genuine curiosity about her experiences, her dreams, and her fears. He did not mock her. He did not pity her. He simply listened. And in listening, he gave her the gift of being truly acknowledged. By the time the feast ended, the atmosphere in the hall had changed completely. The nobles no longer smirked with superiority. Instead, they whispered nervously, sensing that something unpredictable had taken root. Leora, for the first time in her life, felt a strange sense of freedom, a feeling that perhaps she could exist beyond the judgments of her people. And Kale, the human who had been handed her as a joke, had unknowingly offered her the most profound gift, the knowledge that she could be valued not for what she could give, but simply for who she was, that night. As the moons of Xylenia cast silver light over the crystal towers, Leora sat alone in her quarters. She traced her fingers over the delicate patterns of her robes, feeling warmth where she had once known only cold expectation. The thought of Kale lingered in her mind, a spark of hope she had never dared to feel. And somewhere deep inside, A quiet voice whispered that perhaps this human had arrived not to be amused by her flaws, but to see her for the first time as a whole person, a person worthy of respect, of care, and maybe, one day, of love. The days after the feast were quiet at first, but not in the way Leora had expected. The Xylenian court, obsessed with appearances and control, had returned to their routines, leaving her largely unobserved. Kale, however, did not disappear as the nobles had hoped. Instead, he sought her out each day, not with ceremony or obligation, but with genuine interest. He would wait outside her quarters, offering small gifts from his home world, shimmering stones, tiny metal trinkets, and jars of dust that sparkled like stars. To him, these were simple tokens of friendship. To Leora, they were treasures, symbols of a human's ability to see beauty where others saw only duty and rules. Their conversations began cautiously. Leora, taught from childhood to hide her emotions, was hesitant to trust. But Kale had a way of speaking that felt like sunlight breaking through a permanent winter. He asked about her childhood, her fears, and her dreams, not to satisfy curiosity, but to understand her. She spoke tentatively at first, revealing little, but gradually, walls she had built over years of judgment began to crumble. She told him about the silent nights when she had stared at the moons and wondered if her life would ever be more than obligations and disappointment. Kale listened without interruption, nodding, smiling, and sometimes laughing softly at the little absurdities of her life. His laughter was infectious, and for the first time in years, Leora found herself smiling without effort. The bond between them grew in the most ordinary of moments. Kale would bring her water from the terraces, their fingers brushing accidentally, but sending tiny sparks through her. They walked through the palace gardens, where alien flowers glowed under the twin suns, sharing stories of worlds they had never seen. Leora discovered that humans experienced emotion differently, expressing love, care, and frustration openly. She found it bewildering at first, but strangely comforting. With Kale, she did not need to maintain her perfect posture or flawless face. She could simply be herself, a princess who laughed, who doubted, who hoped. Yet, even as their closeness deepened, the Xylenian council's shadow hung over them. They observed discreetly, whispering to one another about how Leora's attention to a human was improper. They expected Kale to falter, to become arrogant, or to leave out of fear. But he did not. He stayed, patient and unflinching, treating Leora with respect and sincerity. His presence became a rebellion against the suffocating traditions of her people. Leora realized that her connection with Kale was not just friendship or amusement. It was a lifeline. Through him, she felt alive in a way she had never known, as if she had been existing only in grayscale and he had brought color back into her world. One evening, under the violet skies of Xylenia, they sat atop the palace terraces, watching the moons rise in tandem. Kale spoke of Earth's oceans, of waves crashing and retreating, and how humans would often feel both small and infinite when standing by them. Leora listened, captivated. She began to understand the depth of human emotion, how courage could exist even in the face of fear, and how care for another being could transform a life. When Kale turned to look at her, she felt a warmth she had never known, a tenderness that went beyond friendship or curiosity. It was a feeling both frightening and exhilarating, like standing on the edge of a cliff and discovering the wind was kind, not cruel. The palace, once a prison of expectations and judgment, began to feel different. Leora no longer feared the eyes of the council as she walked the halls. Their whispers no longer mattered as much as the quiet affirmation she found in Kale's presence. And Kale, for his part, saw not a barren princess, but a soul of strength, resilience, and beauty. Every gesture, every smile, every shared secret deepened the connection between them. It was a bond forged not in grandeur or ceremony, but in honesty, laughter, and the simple act of being seen. By the end of that week, Leora understood that the joke the Xyleans had played was meaningless to her. The person beside her, human, imperfect, and full of unpredictable warmth, had given her something her entire life on Xylenia had denied: the knowledge that she could matter, not for her rank or her ability to produce heirs, but for the person she truly was. And as Kale held her hand gently beneath the glow of alien moons, Leora felt the first stirring of hope, the kind that could grow into something extraordinary, something that neither court nor custom could ever erase. The harmony Kale and Leora had begun to feel was fragile. Whispers in the corridors of the palace had grown louder, sharper, and impossible to ignore. The Xylenian Council, always quick to enforce control, had caught sight of the closeness between the human and the princess. They were furious. In their minds, Kale, a mere outsider from a distant, inferior world, had no right to touch their carefully curated order. Leora's laughter, once soft and free, now drew judgmental glances. The council demanded that Kale leave immediately, declaring his presence a threat to their customs and authority. The tone of their words was cold, commanding, and final. But Kale, who had come to Xylenia not to conquer but to connect, refused. Leora felt her chest tighten as the council's fury unfolded. Fear surged through her, not for herself, but for the fragile bond she had found with Kale. She knew the council could be merciless, and she had spent her life obeying their expectations, never daring to challenge them. Yet, looking at Kale's calm, resolute face, she felt a strange courage take root. He would not abandon her, and she would not abandon him. Together, they had discovered a world beyond judgment, a space where laughter and care mattered more than status or duty. But now that world felt like it might collapse under the weight of tradition and cruelty. The confrontation came quietly but sharply. In the council chamber, Leora stood tall, facing the elders who had once ruled her life with invisible chains. Kale stood beside her, unwavering. The Xylenian Council demanded she reject the human, to abandon what they called an unacceptable distraction. Their voices were cold and filled with authority. Yet Leora, for the first time, found her voice rising, steady and clear. She spoke of trust, of care, of a connection that had nothing to do with rank or bloodlines. Kale listened, silently supporting her, a steady presence that gave her words strength she didn't know she had. The council's anger deepened, and threats followed. Leora could feel the weight of their authority pressing down on her, suffocating and relentless. They hinted at punishment, at exile, at public shaming for daring to defy their expectations. Her heart pounded as fear mingled with a strange thrill, a realization that she was choosing something real, something valuable, over fear of judgment. Kale reached for her hand, and she felt the warmth and reassurance of his human touch. In that moment, the uncertainty of the future became secondary to the certainty of the bond they shared. The Xylenians, inflexible and proud, could not comprehend the strength found in human loyalty and empathy. Kale's refusal to bow, to retreat, to abandon Leora, was a language they did not speak. He argued calmly, appealing not to fear, not to tradition, but to the humanity in them. It was a concept alien to the council, yet undeniably powerful. Leora watched him and felt her own courage grow. She realized that strength was not only in physical power or political rank, but in the willingness to stand for what mattered. Even when facing overwhelming opposition, that night, Leora lay awake in her chambers. The sounds of the alien city muted behind thick crystal walls. Fear still lingered, like shadows stretching across her mind, but it was no longer paralyzing. She thought of Kale's unwavering eyes, of the kindness that had given her life meaning beyond her title. For the first time, she considered a future where she was not confined by judgment, where she could choose her own path, even if it meant defying her entire world. The council could threaten, scold, or punish, but they could not take the truth of her heart away. She had found someone who saw her completely, and she would not let go of that gift. The palace seemed colder than ever in the days that followed. Guards watched them more closely, whispers followed their steps, and the weight of expectation pressed down relentlessly. Yet, Kale and Leora moved through it together. Each shared glance, each quiet conversation became a small act of rebellion. In a world built on control, they had discovered freedom in each other's presence. And as the moons of Zelenia cast pale light across the towers, Leora felt a strange, fierce hope rise within her. No matter the threats, no matter the pressure, she would not lose this connection. For the first time, she knew the true meaning of courage, and the human beside her was teaching her how to embrace it. The night air was thick with tension, carrying the faint hum of the city below as Kale and Leora prepared to leave the palace. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the stillness. The council's threats had grown sharper, and it was clear they would not allow their joke to continue. Leora's heart pounded like a drum in her chest, equal parts fear and exhilaration. She had spent her life in the gilded cage of expectations, and now, for the first time, she was about to step into the unknown. Kale, standing beside her, radiated calm determination. His hand found hers, and the simple touch steadied her shaking fingers. Together, they would face the dangers that awaited beyond the crystal walls. Their plan was simple but perilous. Kale had studied the palace from the moment he arrived, noting patrol patterns, guard shifts, and hidden corridors. They would use the old service tunnels beneath the eastern wing, a maze of narrow passages that had been abandoned for centuries. The human's mind worked differently from the Zelenians, relying on intuition, adaptability, and the courage to take risks. Leora marveled at his confidence, a stark contrast to the rigid caution of her own people. As they slipped through the first darkened corridor, she felt the thrill of freedom and the sharp sting of fear. Every step could lead to capture, every sound could alert the guards. Yet she could not deny the exhilaration of moving through the world on her own terms. Outside, the palace garden stretched into the moonlight, alien flora glowing softly like embers. Kale guided her along the hidden paths, their footsteps muffled by soft moss. They paused beneath a towering tree with silver leaves that shimmered in the light, catching their breath and listening for pursuit. Leora felt a strange sense of wonder. For the first time, she noticed the beauty of her world beyond ceremonial halls and judgmental eyes. She laughed softly, a sound that had become natural with Kale, and he smiled back. In that fleeting moment, it was as if the entire universe had conspired to let them breathe freely, to let them be themselves, but the Xylenian guards were relentless. Alarms sounded in the distance, low and threatening, and the air vibrated with the echo of pursuit. Kale's instincts took over. He led Leora through twisting paths, over glassy streams and across ridges of jagged crystal. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, but she refused to fall behind. Every stumble was met with his steady hand, every doubt answered with calm reassurance. In his presence, fear became manageable, and courage became something she could feel growing inside her chest. She realized that survival was not only about fleeing danger, it was about trusting the one beside her and trusting herself to endure. Hours passed like minutes, and exhaustion began to press heavily upon them. They found shelter in a cave hidden by cascading crystal vines, the alien landscape both strange and protective. Kale tended to her, brushing dirt and leaves from her hair, his gentle care making her feel alive and human in a way she had never experienced within the walls of her palace. Leora rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady and reassuring. In that quiet, hidden space, they spoke not of strategy or escape, but of dreams of places they wished to see, of lives they wished to build, and of a future that could exist beyond the reach of judgment and cruelty. By dawn, exhaustion had faded into resolve. The journey ahead would be difficult, full of unknown dangers and endless uncertainty. Yet neither Kale nor Leora wavered. In the vast alien wilderness, they discovered a freedom neither had known before, and in that freedom, a connection that was unbreakable. The Zelenian palace, with all its grandeur and expectation, was behind them, and ahead lay a future they would create together. As the first light of the twin suns touched the horizon, Leora realized that the human beside her, the one who had been given a princess as a joke, had become her protector, her partner, and the first true source of hope in her life. For the first time, she felt that she could choose her destiny. And that choice was no longer dictated by fear, but by courage, trust, and love. Not far from the gleaming towers of Zelenia, Kale and Leora found a world untouched by rigid customs or judgment. The planet was wild, with skies painted in colors unfamiliar to Leora and forests that hummed with life. Every sunrise felt like a gift, every wind that touched her skin a reminder that she was no longer a prisoner of expectation. Together, they began to carve out a life in the unknown. Kale, with his human ingenuity, taught her simple ways to survive, how to find water, how to gather food, and how to navigate by the stars. Leora, once sheltered and restrained, discovered a joy in learning, a thrill in independence, and a quiet pride in her own resilience. Their days were filled with small victories. Leora learned to recognize edible plants, to fashion tools from stone and wood, and to move through the forest silently. Kale marveled at her quick mind and adaptability, realizing that the council's judgment had been foolish. Leora was far from helpless. She was strong, intelligent, and courageous. At night, they would sit beneath alien constellations, sharing stories of their homes. Kale spoke of Earth's oceans, of the laughter of children, and of human determination. Leora shared her memories of Zelenia, not the royal ceremonies, but the quiet moments she had once longed to experience. In those hours, laughter and conversation became their greatest treasures, more valuable than any wealth or title. Time passed, and with it came a discovery that would change everything. Leora realized her body, long deemed barren by Zelenian science, had never been incapable. It had simply been misunderstood. She was pregnant. At first, disbelief shook her to the core. She had been told for years that this was impossible, that her life would never carry new life. But as days turned into weeks, the truth became undeniable. Life had blossomed inside her, a miracle born of love and trust rather than duty or expectation. The realization brought tears to her eyes, and Kale held her, whispering words of wonder and joy. For him, it was proof of resilience. Hence, proof that even in the coldest, most rigid societies, life could find a way when nurtured with care. The news of the child became their shared hope. Leora spoke to the unborn life as though it were already present, telling stories of Earth, of kindness, and of courage. Kale prepared for the future with meticulous care, ensuring that they would have a safe place for the child to grow, free from fear or judgment. They built shelters, cultivated small gardens, and hunted with patience and respect for the planet's balance. Each task, no matter how simple, felt sacred because it was part of creating a world where their child could thrive. Leora often watched Kale, marveling at his determination and quiet strength. It was not the muscles or bravado that impressed her, but his heart, his unwavering belief in her, in their family, and in the value of life itself. Even in this peaceful existence, challenges remained. The planet was beautiful, but unpredictable. Sudden storms, strange predators, and treacherous terrain tested their skills and patience. Yet, with each obstacle, Leora discovered a growing confidence. She had faced the judgment of her own people, the threat of exile, and the fear of being abandoned. The wilderness, with all its dangers, felt simpler by comparison. She realized that fear could be tamed with trust, courage, and love. And Kale, always beside her, showed her that true strength was not in control or power, but in commitment and care. As months passed and the child within her grew, Leora began to understand the true meaning of freedom. It was not merely the absence of surveillance or expectation. It was the ability to choose love over fear, courage over obedience, and hope over despair. She had left the palace a princess marked for ridicule, and now she was becoming a mother, a creator of life, and a witness to the unpredictable, beautiful force of the human spirit. Kale's hand resting on her belly reminded her daily of the miracle they had nurtured together. For the first time, she truly believed that life could be extraordinary when guided by compassion, trust, and the unbreakable bond between two hearts. The journey back to Xylenia was quiet, yet charged with emotion. Leora's steps were careful, carrying the weight of new life and new purpose. The planet she had fled years ago, once a prison of judgment and expectation, now awaited her not as a place of fear, but as a stage for transformation. Beside her, Kale moved with the steady confidence she had come to rely on. Every glance between them carried reassurance, every touch a reminder that they had survived, grown, and built a bond no council, no tradition could break. Leora's heart beat not with fear, but with anticipation, an unfamiliar, thrilling courage. The Xylenian palace rose before them, its crystal spires gleaming in the light of twin suns. Inside, the council still ruled with the same cold authority, unaware that their joke had been transformed into something far greater than they could comprehend. Leora walked with Kale, shoulders straight, chin high. She no longer carried the timid hesitations of a princess born to Cone, expectation, but the quiet strength of someone who had faced the wilderness, survival, and the miracle of life itself. Whispers followed their steps, curious and fearful, as if the palace itself sensed that something extraordinary was approaching. When they entered the grand hall, the effect was immediate. The council, accustomed to control and obedience, could not hide their shock. The princess they had mocked was no longer fragile or fearful. She was radiant, carrying the unmistakable glow of motherhood. The human who had stood beside her, the one they had thought powerless, walked with calm authority. And between them, the child moved within Leora, a living testament to a bond they could not dismiss or contain. Silence fell, thick and heavy, as the nobles absorbed what had arrived before them. Leora's presence was no longer a subject for amusement. It was a challenge to their assumptions, a revelation of human resilience and love. Leora spoke first, her voice steady and clear. She did not demand respect, nor did she plead for understanding. Instead, she told her story, the truth of her life in the wild, of Kale's unwavering care, of the discovery that she could carry life after all. Her words were simple, yet they carried a power the Xylenians could not deny. She described the joys and struggles, the moments of fear and triumph, and the profound love that had grown between them. The council, rigid and proud, had never encountered such courage expressed not in power or commands, but in honesty, vulnerability, and strength. Kale stood beside her, silent but unshakable. His presence amplified her words, a living proof that humans could embody compassion, courage, and unyielding loyalty. The nobles who had once laughed at their union could not reconcile their assumptions with the truth before them. Leora's child, a symbol of life and unity, moved within her, and the room felt impossibly still, as if even the walls were listening. In that quiet, the council began to grasp that what they had intended as a joke had been transformed into a legacy that no mockery could erase. Tears glistened in Leora's eyes, not of fear but of triumph. She had returned to the place that had once defined her worth with nothing but judgment, carrying proof of life, love, and defiance of expectation. The palace, which had once been a cage, now seemed smaller in comparison to the life she carried and the human who had stood beside her. Whispers of admiration began to circulate, cautious and trembling, as nobles realized that a new story was unfolding, one of courage, trust, and the unpredictable power of humanity. As she looked at Kale, their hands meeting over the swell of her belly, Leora felt an overwhelming sense of completion. They had left as a princess and a human, uncertain and afraid. They had returned as a mother and a partner, unbroken and triumphant. The Xylenian council could no longer define her. They could no longer judge her. In her eyes, the future was theirs to shape, a future where life, love, and the human spirit could rewrite the rules of even the most rigid society. And for the first time, Leora knew that she was no longer just a princess. She was a force, a mother, and a testament to the unexpected, unstoppable strength of humanity. The palace of Xylenia had never felt so quiet. Even the usual hum of crystal energy seemed muted, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what was unfolding. Leora walked through the grand halls with Kale at her side, the child within. Her moving gently, a small but undeniable proof of life and love. Nobles and council members alike turned to watch, their expressions ranging from shock to awe. No one dared interrupt. The princess they had once mocked had returned not as a pawn, not as a fragile figure to be judged, but as a mother radiant, unyielding, and full of a quiet power that demanded respect. Leora reached the central chamber, the heart of the council, where the elders sat in their elevated seats, expecting to see her humbled or fearful. Instead, she stopped in the center, her gaze steady and her voice calm but firm. She spoke not with anger, but with the authority of experience. She told them of the wilderness, of survival and struggle, of the love that had grown between her and Kale, and the miracle that had come from it. Every word carried weight, not because of threats or power, but because it was real, authentic, undeniable, and full of humanity. The council could feel it in their bones. The life they had tried to dismiss, the bond they had thought inconsequential, was far stronger than they had ever imagined. Kale stood silently beside her, a steady presence. The human's mere existence among them was a testament to adaptability, compassion, and courage. Leora had learned from him, grown because of him, and together they had defied expectation, survived danger, and created life where none had been believed possible. The council had always valued perfection, control, and the absence of error. But here, in the unassuming bond of two beings, lay a power they could not quantify. It was messy, unpredictable, and alive, and it had triumphed. Whispers spread across the chamber as Leora allowed the elders to take in what had happened. Some were ashamed, others hesitant, but all were undeniably affected. The child she carried symbolized more than just a future heir. It was a living proof that life and love could defy logic, that courage could change destiny, and that humanity, strange, fragile, yet relentless, could alter even the most rigid traditions. Leora felt a swell of emotion, not for herself, but for the life growing within her, for the human who had never faltered, and for the truth that they had created together. She was no longer bound by the judgments of others. She belonged to herself, to her family, and to a future of her own making. The council, for the first time in memory, was silent. Their authority felt diminished, not by words of challenge, but by the undeniable reality of love, life, and courage. Leora's presence alone shifted the balance. The human by her side demonstrated the strength of spirit over tradition, the triumph of care over cruelty. And slowly, hesitantly, respect began to emerge where mockery once reigned. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were witnessing its undeniable force. Kale gently rested his hand over Leora's belly, and she leaned into him, feeling the warmth, strength, and constancy that had guided them through the wilderness and back. The child inside them stirred, as if sensing the world opening up, as if already claiming a place among the stars. Leora smiled, tears shining in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of the moment. They had arrived together, unbroken, triumphant, and ready to rewrite what it meant to be.